Welcome to Real Coaching Radio, the podcast for coaches by coaches. We are here to teach you how to get the most out of your clients and yourself. This is where beauty meets the beast, brains meet brawn, and science meets, well, bro science. Welcome to Real Coaching Radio. Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. Today, me and my co-host Mark do our first Q&A episode. We discuss autoregulation, how to warm up for pull-ups, and how often should you train the same body part. If you take a look in the show notes, each question is timestamped, so you will be able to find the part which is relevant to you. So without any further ado, let's get on with the episode. Right, now I'm going to start today's Q&A with a question which is actually, which I want to explore. So I got asked this question.
Okay.
A ball bounces half the distance every bounce. Therefore, does it ever stop bouncing?
Ball bounces half the distance vertically or half the distance horizontally?
So you throw a ball along a corridor.
Yeah.
Longest corridor in the world.
Yeah.
No end to this corridor.
Yeah.
A ball bounces half the distance every bounce. Therefore, does it ever stop bouncing?
Is this corridor perfectly flat?
Perfectly flat. The ball just bounces half the time. Now, my first thought is, of course.
Of course, it does stop bouncing.
It stops. But, because you got to think, say this ball bounces, say you throw it and it bounces a meter, right?
Yeah.
And then it bounces like half a meter and so on.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, the ball's just going to, well, no, it don't.
If you think about Newton's laws, and like an object continues in motion unless it's any additional load is, placed upon it.
So it's got to, yeah. What do you think? Let us know what you think, because
There'll be some proper physics geek out there who know the answer to that.
if you are a physics geek or you know a physics geek,
What does Google say? Have you ever Googled it?
I haven't Googled it. Are you going to Google it?
I'm going to Google it.
Google it. So if there is a physics geek out there who actually does know this answer, we'd love to know. My thought is at some point you're just going to be looking at this ball and it's just going to be bouncing with what looks like on the same spot up and down. Is Google got anything interesting to say?
In the magical world of idea, the ball would never stop bouncing.
Never stop bouncing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, going back to the physics geeks, if there is anyone out, can we call them geek?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that as a compliment.
If
I was called a geek, I would say that as a bit of a compliment.
Yeah. I think geeks, the term geek's changing. I think as you get older, the term geek becomes cool again.
Yeah.
So if there is someone who wants to do this experiment for us, I don't know how you do it. Maybe you have like a computer which can kind of generate it. But if you can work that out, then that would be great. So the first question for today, so we've going to go through about 4 questions today. The first one is going to be, what warm-ups would you recommend for pull-ups?
Yeah. Okay. So, firstly, we need to look at what we're doing.
Yeah.
We need to look at the muscles that are involved. So, obviously, primarily we're working the lats. And obviously, the biceps are going to be involved in that. So, we really need to look at what motions these muscles create. Obviously, the biceps are some form of elbow flexion, and the lats allow a lot of movement, but they are a very strong extensor of the shoulder, so they extend the shoulder. And they also, because they're a massive muscle that span the whole range of your back, really, or certainly a large degree of your area of your back. And they allow a little bit of lateral flexion of the spine. So I would say, if you need a warm up, we need to consider basically these movements. So if you're going to warm up appropriately for pull-ups, first of all, we need to make sure that we're stabilizing the scapula. You might be able to do that through some form of row variation, whether that be using a TRX. Obviously, you're warming up, so you're not going to make those TRXs too challenging, and making sure that we're working on stabilizing that scapula. It might also be some form of like kettlebell windmill, again, to start to stabilize the shoulder joint, stabilize the scapula. And also, when you're doing that row motion, the biceps are going to start to move as well. Once you've maybe done a couple of sets of those, I would say you probably want to move into some form of pullover motion, whether that be either a straight up or some variation of that. So a straight arm pull down with some bands, a dumbbell pullover, a banded pullover, whatever kit you have access to, really. Again, looking to stabilize that scapula, get the serratus involved. The serratus's job is to stabilize the scapula. And obviously also that is extension of the shoulder. So we are really targeting the lats. And then maybe there might be some variations of kind of either some sort of banded pull down motion, whereas as you perform, almost like you mimic a lat pull down, if you like, and you take that into some side flexion of the spine, or it might even be some form of high pulley row variation where you take that into some sort of flexion of the spine. So you're closing that gap between the shoulder and the hip, if you like. And I would say that would be a pretty comprehensive warm up to get your lats engaged.
Because that's the one thing with the warm up, and the crucial thing is, because you've listed off pretty much three exercises which could be exercises on their own.
Yep.
So you need to think when you're going in to do warm ups, if pull ups the first thing you have written on your program, then these things beforehand are just a warm up. So we're not looking to stress your muscles too much. We're not looking to get you tired. Like, you shouldn't really be out of breath at all when doing a warm up like this. It is purely to activate your lats, to let them know pretty much like what's about to happen.
Yeah, and especially some of those exercises, if it's like a windmill or something like that, and we're looking to try and stabilize the scapula and create and increase stability through the shoulder, we obviously want lighter weight, because if you're going too heavy, you're just really relying on your strength. At the moment, strength isn't what we're trying to target. We want to stabilize, so we want to create some form of instability so that we have to become more stable.
Which is something that you need to think about when it always goes back to, what am I trying to achieve? And with a warm up, it is that, like, you want to stabilize yourself ready to go up for this pull up. The only other thing I would probably add in is, I like to do, before I go and actually do my set, I maybe do like 1 or 2 pull-ups before I go into doing it, or do some scap pull-ups themselves.
Yep.
Just so I can feel kind of how heavy I feel that day. I know that sounds strange.
Yeah, I'll probably just get used to like some grip on the bar.
Yeah, because I find if you're going to come straight in, I know so many people who go straight in and don't worry about warming up. And a good warm-up can actually benefit your routine going forward, right?
Absolutely. Like we should, well, hopefully we know there are some amazing performance benefits to warming up appropriately. Now, I'm pretty terrible for warming up, as you know. My warm up for a back squat is 100 kilo back squat. So yeah, I personally am not very good for warming up. It is something I'm getting better at as I'm getting older. But yeah, it's like, I do know that if I do a real thorough warm up, my session is way more productive, and not just from a physical point of view. Like, it's a good opportunity for you to get yourself into the zone, if you like.
Yeah, and you find you can almost work things out as well if you're warming up correctly. And the one thing that I'm bad at is I do a lot of low level mobility stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I very rarely come up into things which, like those pullovers and the stuff which kind of gets you to that point. Do you know what I mean?
And I think that's a common error with a lot of people when it comes to warming up. And like what you said earlier is right in terms of the load that you're using is definitely a warm-up load. But that's the same as like talking about a workout. The warm-up load needs to be appropriate for you. Obviously, you might still begin with something really, really light, but if you're a strong individual, as your warm-up progresses, you might be performing like some single arm rows with a 25-30 kilo dumbbell as part of your warm-up.
I've trained in a gym where there's strong men coming in to do log press, and their warm-up is like a set of 12 on the 50 kg dumbbells.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, and it's all relative to you and to what you need. I think especially warm-ups, you got to find what works for you, and you got to find what you need to do to get yourself kind of ready for your session ahead.
Yeah.
And to think about it when you go in, like a lot of people are really good at planning their main sessions, but plan your warm-up going into that as well.
Yeah. And I would say, so two things. Firstly, just like your training progresses, you want to try and get your warm-up to progress. And secondly, I've forgotten what the second thing was.
That's fine.
What was the second thing? What did you just say?
I said it's all relative. So it's all, you have to work it out yourself. You have to try and work out what's going to work for you when you come in to do your warm-ups. Because for me, for example, like when I come in to do pull-ups, the exercises you mentioned, I don't do them because that for me isn't what benefits me the most.
Yeah, I still can't remember what the second
That's
thing
fine.
was.
So when I come in and do pull-ups, I do shoulder dislocates is one of my favorite things that I like doing. I like doing some face pulls, and face pulls for me, like I like using a band for it, or maybe some band pull aparts, and it's just so I can get myself ready to be in this kind of like retracted position. I find when I'm about to do pull-ups, if I'm feeling tight, if my shoulders feel tight, which is why I do shoulder dislocate, I get more out of it. It's just adding something in, maybe some TRX rows before I go into my pull-ups. It's probably something I'm now going to start doing.
Yeah, I remembered what the second thing was.
Go on.
So the second thing was when we were talking about single arm rows, and we were talking about like those powerlifters and strong men, and using an appropriate load. So a lot of the time we hear the word like corrective exercise, and I think that kind of stuff has its place, and a lot of people use warm-ups as corrective exercise. But I think people really need to try and get to a position where they're not thinking of corrective exercise, they're just thinking of exercising correctly.
Right.
In terms of, and if they're exercising correctly, there's no real need for corrective exercise.
Okay, so as in, as long as you're performing things the way they're meant to be performed.
Yeah. And because like people, and I'm not slating any of this stuff at all, because I do it in some of my own training and I do it with some of my clients. But like people use like banded work all the time, and like it's and quote unquote like corrective work, so it goes along the lines of what we were saying, kind of that warm up always stays real low level.
Yeah.
And like there should be some areas of your warm up that are certainly low level, because you're coming into the gym at a completely rested state, unless you've taken a boatload of pre-workout. And you're trying to bridge this gap between like this rested state and the state you need to be in order to hit your first working set, if you like, and trying to progress that. But if you're just doing everything low level, as you said, you like to do a couple of kind of one or two warm-up reps on a pull-up before you do your first set. Yeah. Like we're bridging that gap between like low-level warm-ups and actually exercising. So don't just think about, corrective-based exercise. Just think about like corrective exercise.
Yeah.
Sorry, exercising correctly.
So, but that follows the kind of ramp protocol that we use for warm-ups very well, and that's something which implementing into my own training has been the great thing, because that mobilizing bit has been perfect for me.
Yeah.
Got there. I've got to hit everything else as well, though. I've got to get my body ready for when it's about to do that. And the same goes for you in your training, and same goes for every different type of exercise that is first on your program. And it's what do you need to do to get the most out of it. And that's probably.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you have on warm ups for the pull up? I know, obviously.
No, I would say that's the main key thing. So like you need to look at trying to, first of all, mobilize that joint. So we need to mobilize the shoulder joint, whether that is through some sort of passover movement that kind of like you said you do. We need to look at stabilizing those areas as well. So particularly stabilizing that scapular area in order for us to be able to do good quality reps. And then kind of maybe progressing a little bit more with a little bit of load relative to who that individual is in these like row patterns, this big shoulder extension pattern, so that we can appropriately get the lats nice and warm for what it is they're wanting to do. Maybe like with pull-ups, you might want to do a little bit of trunk work, but if your row variation can be done with some kind of like TRX or ring-based rows, I prefer rings over a TRX. If you can do some sort of row-based variation using that, obviously you can get a fair amount of trunk engagement anyway.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing. Again, remember what is your desired outcome? What do you want to gain from your warm-up? One of the other questions we've got asked, and moving on to pretty much our main session now, should I prioritize auto-regulation in sessions or stick to the rest time that has been provided for me? What would you say on this? I have my own opinion.
If I was to give a real quick fire answer, and then we can go into it in a bit more detail, I would say auto-regulate. But there are some things to consider with that.
My answer is it depends who you are.
Yeah, that is one of the main things there is to consider.
Because the one thing, your body, I guess, does have this natural time clock, right? Which when you do train, if any of you have weight trained before, you finish a set and say your rest time says 90 seconds. And you look at the clock and it's already been 2 minutes and you're like, I can't get back under the bar yet. We have this, and then a minute goes by, 2 minutes go by, and your body's like, right, I'm ready again, and let's go back in. Now, that's great when you start to understand how true that is to you and the desired outcome, again, that you're looking for. Because for me, I set rest periods for people, and I give a range, and I basically say, just fall within this range. The main reason is because there are certain rest periods which are recommended for certain outcomes and certain goals. So that's what I kind of stick to and stick within those kind of, I guess I stick within them quite a bit. But then when I'm working up to like strength sessions, if I'm getting someone who's more advanced, I pretty much say to them, this is what I advise, your body will know.
Yeah. So, absolutely. One thing I'd probably add to that is, and again, it depends on who you are. I would say auto-regulation over strict rest times. However, if I knew my client was less motivated, let's say, and like pretty much any other human being, you give them an inch and they take a mile. And you say, or you don't prescribe any rest, and you probably have an idea that they're not a particularly motivated individual. They're having like 14 minutes rest between sets.
But this is the other thing that goes into is depending on what type of person you are, because if you are likely to kind of take more than you should, then yourself, and it just comes to being honest with yourself. But then if you are dealing with a beginner, if you're a coach and you're dealing with a beginner, or you yourself have just started training and you get prescribed rest times, I'm going to suggest to stick to them. A lot of people who come from, if you're used to doing group exercise classes, like Les Mills classes, body pump stuff, where it's all pretty much go and there's very little rest time, then if you come in and you start resistance training and it says 2 minutes rest period, and after 30 seconds, you're so bored you want to go again, I would advise probably sticking as close as you can to the rest times being provided. And that is because there is a reason for those rest times. We want your body to rest, to recover, to get ready for the next set that we're going into. Because otherwise you aren't working hard enough. And what I mean by that is, say we're going to sit on a chest press machine and you're going to do 3 sets of 10. Well, say on your first set of 10, you do your set, and then 20 seconds later, you do your other set, and you get 10 again. So you get 2 sets of 10 out, and you only had 20 seconds rest. If the rest time provided is around 2 minutes, then that second set of 10, you wouldn't have got close to being able to do. So that's where it comes into, that's why it's all about, are you working hard enough? Because that second set, you shouldn't have been able to do, so the weight probably needs to increase. And that means that if the weight's increased, I'm going to need that rest time. So a lot of times, if you're someone who's just beginning, rest times are really important. You can still auto-regulate. And again, I think that's the main thing. You can, and you probably should, but there is a guidance for a reason.
Yeah. So, and I would say for those of you that are beginners and new to resistance training, if you take the example that Charlie's just spoken about, like if you're doing a set of 10 and you're having 20 seconds rest and you're able to do another set of 10, there's either two things going on there. As Charlie said, either the weight isn't heavy enough for you, or simply you come from a background or you're completely new to exercising, you just don't have the capacity to have any, you don't have any more output. You can't move any more weight. Like, there's, like we spoke about earlier on one of the other podcasts, like strength is a skill.
Yes.
Like, it takes time, right?
It does.
But yeah, like rest times are important. Like I like to give a range and a guideline on rest periods, but yeah, I would say probably auto-regulate rest periods within sessions. And
just be honest with yourself as well. Be honest with what type of person you are. That's part of it.
Yeah. And along line with that, like auto-regulate the amount of weight that
Correct.
you use. So, if you go in one day and you put some weight on the bar, your warm-up sets feel really heavy. You just feel less mobile. And then, yeah, you might need to take a few things down. Ultimately, just sacking off the session probably isn't the best thing to do. You're going to get some benefits from taking the weight down, maybe working on some tempo work. So just slow the movement down, focus on nailing good quality positions. Quality is more important than anything really. Execution is going to be by far the most important thing, rather than just chucking the weight on the bar and moving from A to B anyhow.
That's why I think, like, I've learned that from watching Ellie. Is she'll come in and she'll have her weights written down, or the percentages she's got to hit today, and sometimes she's working up towards those percentages and it feels amazing, and she could probably go past, but she sticks to her plan. Or she gets up to those weights and she's like, I just can't today.
Yep.
And that's when she understands, well, if I tried, it would probably do more damage than good.
Absolutely. Like if there's a high possibility that if you just keep going and try and hit it, you're potentially going to get injured. If you get injured, that means you're not training for, 2 days to 6 months, whatever the injury is that you cause. But if you just take a little bit of load off the bar, then you're probably more likely to able to come back tomorrow and do it all again.
Yeah.
I think people have this mindset of, and we talk about, and we spoke about it on one of the previous podcasts, that we talk about progressive overload, and we talk about, these daily increments or whatever it might be. And that is the way, that is a way to progress, and that is a real good way to progress. But I think people need to realize, like, weight can also come down. Like, progression isn't this linear line.
No. That's why I think programming can get so there's so much detail that goes into it, because it's not just one factor. It's not just, well, let's just keep putting weight on the bar, let's stick it in this rep range, let's stick with these exercises. There's so much to think about. And everything that goes into a program takes into consideration, do you need a rest week? And that rest week may show itself from when you go in to do a session and it's just not feeling it today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, like, a big key take home is kind of auto-regulate on a 24-hour period. So kind of like every day you hit, like, there's a reset button. So you wake up that day and you're just like, right, what am I feeling like today? When you're in the gym, and you've got this is where there's a level of integrity and honesty that's required. When you're in the gym and you feel good, like, push the needle, like, work hard. When don't necessarily go beyond limits, don't go mental, but push the envelope a little bit.
Door.
Yeah. When you're having days where you're not feeling it so much, like, just pull back a little bit. Like, we've said this on most podcasts that we've done, in terms of, and we say this all the time, like, consistency wins, adherence wins. Like, the most consistent people are some of the most successful people. So if that means coming back off weight a little bit and it allows you to be consistent within your training, think of the bigger picture. Think 6 months down the line. Think a year down the line. Those days are going to pay off rather than just hammering yourself into the ground. Like one of the things I used to do with some like high performance clients that I used to work with was I used to get either just a piece of paper and a pen, or you know those counters that like doormen have where they count any people are going in and out of a club or whatever. So they used to have one of them, and every morning they'd set a 20-second stopwatch, and for 20 seconds they'd just hammer it and get as many as they could.
Right.
And then obviously you get a number, or you get a pen and a bit of paper, and for 20 seconds you put as many dots as you can on that paper for 20 seconds. Obviously you get a number, and you know at the beginning you're just getting like an arbitrary number. It means nothing. But every kind of day going forward, if let's say you hit, I don't know, you got 40 dots on day one, and on day 6 you manage 15 dots, just like, right, well, you're going to take it easy today because your nervous system is clearly nowhere near
not
as responsive
enough
as it was. You know,
that's a really smart way of doing things.
And it's a real, like, for some people, they like seeing stuff. They like being able to objectively identify, kind of, rather than just subjectively, oh, I feel a bit tired today, I don't really fancy it. But just like, well,
that's the thing. How do you know? And I after I caught COVID, and when I came back to training, I failed on a back squat and failed on a bench press, and that was because in my mind I asked that question of, am I really tired? Can I really not do it? Or is this just me flaking out? And that's something which is really hard to understand. When it comes to it, I was right. I was tired and I failed the lift. But if I didn't push to that place, I wouldn't have known that, okay, I can probably regulate myself pretty well. I probably know myself pretty well. Whereas if you don't, it's really difficult. Like if you're a beginner, you may find the difference between hinging and squatting difficult, which is completely fine. So when I ask you, can you feel this? Can you feel this exercise in your quads? And you can't feel it because you don't know what your quads are. For you to say, I'm going to auto-regulate, is probably not the best way to go.
Yeah.
So understand who you are. If you've been training for a while, auto-regulation is fine. We could probably do a whole podcast
Absolutely.
on auto-regulation.
There's so much to talk about. But I would say, like you just said, if you're a little bit more advanced, auto-regulation is probably a real smart way to go, especially if that you have other stuff going on. And if you're a full-time athlete, auto-regulation is still really important. But if you're a full-time athlete, you probably have more time to be able to recover, rest, and gain all these adaptations. So you might be able to stick to a slightly more stricter regime. If you've got other stuff going on, whether that's work, family, study, whatever it might be, like auto-regulation is, because otherwise, if you don't, it's probably going to have a knock-on effect on other areas of your life.
Stress is stress.
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate key. Is stress is stress. You're going to put more stress on your body, or you're going to understand where you are. So be honest with who you are, and I think you'll be in for a good shout there.
Yeah, but I reckon we do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Next question. How often should I train the same body part?
Mm-hmm. I guess it depends what the goal is, but I'm assuming the goal might be hypertrophy.
Yes. So I'm going to assume that as well. And that word, it depends, will come up a lot. But
I would say if your goal is to gain muscle tissue and you are a beginner, then frequency is absolutely your best friend here. You know, so I would say you are wanting to train a muscle group pretty much every other day.
Right. Okay.
If you are a beginner. And when I say beginner, I probably mean somewhere between 0 to 2 years of training. Like I would class someone who's been training for 2 years as still fairly a beginner.
And the train, when we go to do that, am I going in and am I doing, if I want to grow my chest, am I going in and just smashing chest every session?
Nah, so I would go in and do, like, you're doing 3, maybe 4, but probably more likely 3 full body sessions. Yeah. So you're targeting the large muscle groups, so quads, hamstrings, lats, pecs, delts. Maybe chuck in. Everyone loves a bicep curl every now and then.
Love a bicep.
So
pain.
Yeah. And then to begin with, and again, this is the stuff that people don't want to do, but like it's the right thing to do. And it's kind of all that's really needed is like you don't need to annihilate that muscle group. You just need to stimulate the muscle tissue. So you're probably doing, honestly, like 2 working sets. It doesn't need to be more than that.
The ego hit on that is huge. But again, if consistency wins, and it's always the reason we're starting at 2 working sets is we have so much, we can go so far from that.
Yep.
There's somewhere to go.
Yeah.
If you go in and you're like, well, I'm going to start an 8 set.
Yeah.
Where the bloody hell do I go from there?
Exactly. So I'm a big fan of like keeping stuff back. So I won't use stuff until I need to use stuff. Like everything is a tool. Everything has its place. And if you've got this big toolbox and you just like chuck the whole toolbox at it at once, like where are you going from there?
And so I use the analogy of, have you ever been on one of those bungee run stuff?
Yeah.
So like you run away and the
inflatable thing.
Yeah. So what I like to think about is we used to do this drill in rugby where we'd have like either a band around us or a bungee around us, and we'd be running with it, and then that bungee and that band, someone will be on the other end of it pulling us backwards. So you've got this resistance. And the way I like to explain it to clients is I am that person holding that band, and when you are ready, I will let it go and you will fly off. Yeah. And that's the way I want you to think about this. You are being, like, it may feel like you're being held back and you could do more, but the effects and the benefit you get afterwards are way more. Like if you've been on one of those, if you've ever done that, where someone's held a band and stopped you from running, then let you go, or even just held your t-shirt and done this kind of out in a park, then you'll realize like that you get that woof and you fly forward. Same when it comes to this. We hold you back, not because you can't do it. You probably can, but I'd rather you be at a place where you're so ready for it. You're almost like you're almost like chomping at the bit to get there.
Yeah, like, we have this, people have this mentality of like more is better. But like more isn't better, like better is better.
Better is better. Yeah.
So if you can go in on Monday, you can do a good full body session, maybe 2 working sets per muscle group. Like, there's a large possibility that you can go back in on Wednesday and you can do another full body session, maybe some variations, some exercises, another full body session and another 2 sets, and you'll be able to do that again on Friday. Whereas if you kind of go in on Monday and you just do 12 sets on a back squat, like if you're a beginner, you're probably not back squatting again for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that over time, like you can accumulate these sets throughout the week.
Yeah.
And that frequency is really going to help you.
Frequency is one of the things that I stick to, because when you go from then 0 to 2 years being a beginner, when we're going up then 2 years plus, how would you say then?
I would probably go into maybe some form of like either like push pull legs, push pull lower version, or some kind of like upper lower split. So we can start to get we can start to drive some more volume in now.
Yeah. Okay.
You might train like 4 days a week now, because you can increase the frequency. You might train 4 days a week, and you might do like push pull legs and then another push session, and then like rotate that, like pull legs, like, you know what I mean? So, and again, this is another thing where I think people kind of get stuck in their ways a little bit, in terms of we have this 7-day period and people just try and assume that everything has to be crammed into this 7-day period. Whereas like, why?
Yeah.
That is not the case. Like, so you're training 4 days a week, but if you were to do like push pull legs, that's a three-day training cycle, right? So across those 4 days, you're going to hit in your first week push twice, because you're going push pull legs push, and then you're going pull legs push pull. So like your frequency is higher.
That's the thing. You can look at everything you do as more than just a 24-hour period, or more than just a 7-day week. Like that again, periodization would be a really good one to kind of discuss on the way programs go together, the way you should train yourself. Is really if you're going to be training for 2, 3, 4 years, then your training program should be based on that kind of period of time. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
If you've got a goal, yes, you may have a goal that you want to get to in 6 months, but there is no harm in going, like what we've said before on the goals, when we said about goal setting, work backwards from that. What do I have to do and how does that fit in? If it is doing 4 sessions a week and they alternate by doing the push-pull and having 2 pushes on 1 week, 2 pulls on another week and 2 legs on another week, that's completely fine.
Yep.
I'd go up from that again then. Your advantage, you've been training for a while. How would you now look at it? If I want to go to the gym, say 5 days a week, 6 days a week.
I would say you got 2 options. You can either, again, segment that even more and start going to some form of body part split. So you're training 1, maybe 2 muscle groups in a session, or you could absolutely stay on like upper lowers, and you could stay on push pull legs, absolutely, and like rotate exercises, manipulate volume and intensities. Like you could stay on an upper lower training session for years and years and years and still progress.
And this is the thing about progression, is that it all depends on what you're doing, because everything works, but nothing works forever. So whatever you are currently doing, if you find that you're stuck and you can't progress any further, it could be worth changing it up. If you're used to doing 3 full body days, like 3 full body sessions a week, then maybe it's time that you do switch to a push pull and you get some more volume going in. I think one of the first things I always do when I speak to someone when they first come on to training, if they've been training for a while, is what have you been doing? And as soon as I know what they've been doing, I put them on something completely opposite.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact that's going to help them straight away. And the reason I know that is because I do it with myself all the time. If I'm stuck in one way of doing things, the way I know is I probably get bored of it. I get tired of it.
Yeah.
And you can change it up, and I feel like that keeps me interested a little bit.
Yeah, keeps you motivated, isn't it? But I would say the biggest mistake people make when they're fairly new to resistance training, especially if it's based around hypertrophy, if your goal is to build muscle tissue, probably somebody that you aspire to might be a bodybuilder. And a lot of bodybuilders do like individual muscle groups per session. But what you've got to consider is like, these are especially if they're like Mr. Olympia, they are genetic freaks.
Yeah. Ronnie Coleman, and you look at Kai Green. I'm pretty sure someone said Kai Green was, when he became pro, he was natural at that point.
Right.
And he was a freak.
Yeah.
I swear I've read that or listened to that in a podcast somewhere. But that's the point. Genetics is...
But also not just the genetics, like they have been training for so long. So you can't say, oh, well, this is what Kai Green does, so that's what I'm going to do.
It doesn't work.
The Kai Green has been training for so long is definitely not natural anymore, even when he was. Definitely not natural. A genetic freak, and you're not that person.
No.
You know, especially if you're a beginner. So again, I remember having a real similar conversation with a client going back a little while now, and it's going off topic of hypertrophy, but it's the same principle really. Somebody who was getting into weightlifting, so wanting to get better at like snatch, clean and jerk, and they said, oh, I found Zoe Smith's weightlifting program online. Now, you know, Zoe Smith is a real good quality weightlifter. And I was like, well, one, it's probably not even her program. Yeah, because it's on Google.
It's on Google. You can find it on Google.
And that's like saying, you know, what was Brad Pitt's workout for Troy? And it's just like some random bloke's workout.
You go on the
what
article,
even is that?
And it's like be the Rock for the day.
Yeah. Like how that's not even his workout. So firstly, it's probably not her workout. And secondly, like, why are you finding Zoe Smith's workout from now? Like, find her workout when she's probably a 9-year-old girl. Yeah. Do that.
That's the thing. But where you are is where you need to be and where you need to start. You can't start thinking that other people's programs are going to be the thing that works for you. And if you train with someone and you find something works better for you, we've said it before, experiment with your own training and see what works for you. It is that simple. And again, consistency being king. But if you're looking and wondering how many times a week should I train the same body part, it all depends on how long you've been training. It depends what your goals are. It depends how you feel when you do that. Because I know for a fact, if I've got someone who is a beginner and I'm going to put them on full body sessions 3 days a week, but they love the pump and they don't do the 3 full body sessions because they get bored of it, well, what's going to be better for them? If I put them on a push-pull legs, or I put them on just a body part split so they can get this kind of pump feeling going on, that's probably going to be better to them because they're going to stick to it. So again, whatever you enjoy the most is probably going to give you the best results.
Yep, absolutely.
Sweet. The last question.
Go for it.
How do I avoid feeling too tired when in a calorie deficit?
Yep. Okay. Probably a lot of things to potentially discuss. Firstly, I would say, how big is the deficit? Because if you're in a big deficit, there's probably no real need to be in that big of a deficit.
Right.
So we have this, I say it's an arbitrary number, it's fairly arbitrary. Like people just you need to be in a calorie deficit of 500 calories a day, because over a week, that's going to be 3,500 calories. That's going to be a pound of fat, like blah, blah, blah. And yes, all of that has some credibility towards it. However, I've had a lot of questions in the past around people who go, how much of a deficit do I need to be in? Like, you just need to be in a deficit.
1 calorie.
Like, it don't matter.
Yeah.
If you're in a deficit, you're in a deficit.
Yeah.
But so I would say, like, if people are tired, the 2 biggest things instantly I would go with is, firstly, how big is the deficit? It might be a case that it is too big.
Yep.
Obviously, I don't know anything about this person or kind of like where they're currently at, but there is a possibility that the deficit is too big, which is why they're tired. And the other instant thing I would look at is, what is currently the quality of their food?
Right.
Is it nutrient dense, high quality food? Is there a lot of vegetables in there?
Or are you doing this potato diet?
Because you could get, like, let's say you're on your calorie requirement for the day is 1,500 calories. Like, you can eat 1,500 calories of, I'm not saying you should do this, but as an example, like chicken, fish, some rice, some potatoes, and a boatload of vegetables. Or you can get 1,500 calories from Mars bars. Now, they can both equate to 1,500 calories.
My mind went Mars bars as well.
Yeah,
You said that.
but you'll probably get quite tired.
You would get tired.
So both of those might equate to 1,500 calories, and over a period of time, you're going to be in this deficit, and people are going to lose weight. However, the quality of the food is obviously very, very different. So I would say, firstly, ensure that there's, if you're in a deficit at all, like, ensure that your food is of a mega high quality and is very nutrient dense as opposed to calorie dense, because so there are some real quote unquote healthy foods out there, and a lot of foods that people enjoy that come under like this healthy kind of word. And the 2 that spring to mind would be things like avocado, peanut butter. Like, these are like a lot of staples in health conscious people's diets, but both of those contain a large amount of calories. And if you're trying to maintain a calorie deficit, your food volume, if you're eating food that is of high calorie, is going to decrease. So you want to eat like lower calorie based food, like fill your plate of broccoli, spinach, green beans, and you will be surprised how much food you can actually eat. So food volume increases, obviously nutrient content increases. You're going to feel like you're eating more food. You're probably going to have more energy because you've got more nutrients from that food. And that's a very good place to start.
It's a very good place to start. Understand as well, if you're in a calorie deficit, do you actually know what deficit you're in? Because if you're someone who's just decided to go on a diet and you have no idea what kind of calories you're consuming on a day-to-day basis, but you're like, oh, I'm on this diet, I'm really tired. Oh, Mark says I need to eat a bit more because I'm in a way too deep of a deficit. You need to know where you're at. You cannot find your way out of like it. A book I read says that if you called me up and you were in London and you said to me, right, I need you to direct me home, and you lived in Manchester. So I started directing you home based on the thought that you were in London. But it turns out you're actually in Birmingham, then the directions I was giving you are never going to get you home.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't know where you are, you don't know where you've got to go. Same when it comes to this.
Yeah. I would also say on that point, when people say to me, I'm in a calorie deficit, my first question is, how do you know?
Yes.
And they will mostly turn around and say, my watch told me I burned X amount of calories yesterday. How the hell does your watch know that? Your watch has no idea.
Your watch is a liar.
Your Apple Watch, your Fitbit, your Garmin, do not use those as a reliable source of how many calories you are burning in a day.
Garmin people are going to be livid because when they say their watch gives them their VO2 max, and I kind of think,
yeah,
tells you all the calories you've burnt today as well. So
yeah, like there is no way a watch can tell you that. The only way you're going to know if you're in a calorie deficit is to eat a certain amount of calories per week. Make sure you know exactly how many calories that is. Weigh yourself every day. Take an average over 7 days. Repeat that process for another 7 days. If your weight has come down, you are in a calorie deficit. If your weight has not moved, definitely maybe extend that for 2 to 3 weeks. If your weight has not moved within 2 to 3 weeks, you are not in a calorie deficit.
Maintenance.
And people can go, oh, this could be definitely another podcast. Like people can go, oh, but I'm not losing weight because I'm in too much of a deficit and I'm in this starvation mode. Like that's not even a thing. Like just Google starvation, right? And trust me, you are not in starvation mode. All right. So that can be a whole another podcast, but like that is not even a thing.
The reason we laugh about this is purely because going on a diet, the reason people say about this and the reason people say they're tired, and I have no idea kind of what situation this person's in, but if you are feeling really tired, are you sure you're not just finding this hard? Because it is hard. Being in a calorie deficit is not easy. If you look at pro bodybuilders, and I'm using extremes because extremes are great examples, when they're coming on a contest prep and they're getting ready, if you see them when they're depleted and they are eating, they are definitely in a calorie deficit. Yeah. When you see them, they genuinely look like skin just attached to their skull. There is nothing in their face. There is no fat on their body. And that is when I'm like, that person looks like they are dying. And genuinely, like they probably are in some kind of way because they're depleting themselves so much. But that level of being, that's how tired I am. Because that level of commitment to being, it is hard, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's the thing you need to work out is, am I just, again, like me when it came to like seeing if I could lift that bench press, was I just flaking out? Are you just flaking out? And it does get hard. But if you don't ultimately know where you're at, you don't know where you've got to go. So having that written down and working out am I actually just being a bitch right now or what?
Yeah. I think there definitely is like a mindset around dieting. Like, you know, I've had clients in the past where it's just like, oh, I want to lose weight, but I don't want to be hungry. It's just like, well, there's got to be some realization of if you're going to be in a deficit, you're going to experience some hunger, and you've got to experience some hunger. You're in negative energy. Like, of course you're going to be hungry. Like
your body's literally eating itself at this point.
And there definitely are times where having like a bit of a refeed or going back to maintenance calories for a short period of time has some physiological adaptations and some benefits. But like, that's not starvation mode. Like they're two very different things. But going back to like the initial question, some other things that we could do to help increase tiredness or to help, decrease tiredness would be, don't just you could look at food quality, make sure that you're not in too big of a deficit. And then other things would be just look at other areas of your life. Are you like are there other mega stressful areas of your life? Is work really stressful at the moment? If work is really stressful at the moment, that might be contributing to your tiredness. Is there anything you can do about that? If not, then you got two options. You either ride it out a little bit, or you just say, right, well, work is obviously something I can't really like pull back on. That's how I earn my living. So at this moment in time, I'm just going to either be in a smaller deficit, or I'm going to go to maintenance for a little while. Once I've got this work project out of the way, I can go back into a deficit, whatever it might be. Or if you're doing other things, like how much are you exercising? I'm going to say, are you exercising too much? And don't take that out of context and say, oh, Mark said stop exercising, because that's not what I said.
You stop exercising, eat more.
Yeah, because that is not what I said. But like, are you going into the gym and doing extra work that you don't really need to do? Like, is there other areas? What's your sleep quality like? Are you staying up until midnight and then getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and wondering why you're tired? So there are other areas of your life that you can look at. So any additional stresses, what's your sleep quality like? What's your food quality like? And how big is your deficit? I would say they are like 4 key areas for you to look at.
Yeah, and start to work out what it is for you that makes you the most tired. Like, is it after you finish the gym and you're just absolutely wiped out? So maybe you can think about planning your meals around when you're going to train. So maybe you plan a couple of hours before you're going into train to have one of your meals then. And maybe when you finish your training, a couple of hours afterwards, or however close afterwards it needs to be for you, you have food after that. Sleep's one of the biggest things for me is create some kind of, have some understanding of when you're going to go to sleep. Is my biggest advice is just have the same time you go to bed and get up at the same time. Like, get that kind of circadian rhythm in place and try not to upset it too much. And then my only other thing is just water. What are you doing? Because drink water throughout the day. If you're having like sugary, sweet kind of things throughout the day and you're not getting enough water in, then you will start to feel tired. My training sessions feel a lot better when I'm hydrated compared to when I'm not. I know I feel better. I can concentrate more. I'm less tired when I drink water. So you need to think about these things as well.
Perfect.
So, that has been longer than we thought it was going to be. If anyone's actually done the experiment, can you let us know if that ball has stopped bouncing or not by now? I'm assuming it would have, but again, we don't know. Google says no. Google says no in the magic land of make-believe, where we can all still go to gyms. That ball is bouncing, and I do look like Arnie. So thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the podcast. We're going to do Q&As quite often. We're going to be putting things out and asking people, what do you want to know? Because let us know. We will discuss it on here. If there is anything else you want from us, then please get in touch. You can email us info@realcoachingradio.co.uk. You can find me and Mark on Instagram @MarkOriginSeries, @HackTheBodyHackTheMind. Anything else, Mark?
No. I look forward to talking more about autoregulation and starvation mode.
We could definitely do 2 podcasts on autoregulation and starvation mode. So for now, if you're in a calorie deficit, enjoy, bear it out. You will be fine. You will not die. Keep going. You can do it. For everyone else, have a lovely day, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you very much for tuning into today's episode of the podcast. I want to say that when it comes to being in a calorie deficit, whatever you decide to do, it has to be sustainable for you. And I say that because I myself am trying to lose a little bit of body fat at the moment. And the weekend I needed or decided to have a blowout and probably overconsume way more than I should have. It is very easy to do, and that may be because the diet that I chose is probably not sustainable and probably not something I can do for a long period of time. So if that's the case with you, then like myself, we may need to change how we do things. We may need to go back to the drawing board and come up with a diet or come up with a way of eating which is going to best suit us, best suit our activity levels, and best suit our day-to-day life. Going on a calorie deficit is hard. Being hungry is hard, and you will experience these things, but just try your best to grind it out. Try your best to get through this stage, and if you do need a break, then you can take a break. It has to be sustainable. It has to be something you can do for the long run. So I just wanted to add that just to kind of make people feel a little bit better about the fact that dieting is really hard. I struggle. I think everyone struggles every now and again. So don't be so hard on yourself and try your best to just keep going with it. So thank you once again for tuning in. This has been Real Coaching Radio.